We're back with more NBA playoff coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering Game 3 of the NBA Finals between the Pacers and the Thunder. Now, as I stated in the last one, this was going to be an all important matchup. You have both teams evening up the series in different ways. A grinded out kind of victory in Game 1 for Indiana, and then just complete domination by the Thunder in the second game. It was going to be very, very key to look for who would respond more convincingly in a matchup like this. The favor would tip to Indiana's side. You're at home, where they've honestly excelled in the playoffs. And they are a little motivated, you could say, after dealing with the struggles they did in the last game. It's not to say that the Thunder are unmotivated whatsoever. They're trying to exact the same kind of situation on Indiana by stealing home court advantage from them. And they certainly have the capability of doing so. But as I stated in the aftermath of that game, the winner of Game 3 would be determined by the amount of physicality present in the game. The Thunder are going to bring it consistently with the two-way players that they have and just the sheer defenders they can deploy at any one point in time, all coming in different sizes and shapes, but still just bringing that relentless force and energy. And to be honest, the Pacers had struggled in both games. If you want to get real technical about it, they struggled in both games to match it. Now, they got away with it in Game 1 because of the shot heard around the world, right? But they got smoked in Game 2, primarily by allowing different ball handlers to just get right past them in the lane, not showing any effort to resist those attempts whatsoever. And in turn, they weren't able to replicate that on the offensive side of the basketball because they continued to settle for shots even when they weren't going in. And they got themselves in a rut. The Pacers could bring the same level of physicality, or at least match it, at critical points in the match. They could end up winning. But if the Thunder continued to have their way, it was going to go in their favor. I will say, though, again, another thing working in Indiana's favor, the crowd was very energetic. It makes sense. That's the very first NBA Finals that they are experiencing there in the last 25 years. Of course they're going to be on cloud 9 for it. And they're going to do everything they can to hype up their basketball team. But as the game got started, they probably lost a little bit of that cheery mood. Because they were down by like 15-6 very early in the first quarter. I think at the midway point. And it's damn, you try to game plan that hard and you have the game within an arm's reach. Still, to come out the gates like that was very questionable, to say the least. Now, I didn't watch that portion because I frankly wasn't able to. But with that being said, as Tyrese Halliburton continued to play along in that first quarter, he did allow the team to get things together by the tail end. They evened it up a little bit, then they went back down by at least 7 before bringing it back. It's not necessarily the worst start in the world, but you would certainly have to tighten up on defense because things are already getting out of hand. Chet Holmgren is off to a hot start, and frankly, Jalen Williams to an extent was too. Whereas Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had only 6 points in the first quarter. Meanwhile, Halliburton, in the minutes that he did play, had 5 points and 4 assists. A very great game, or a great start to the game compared to what he did in the entire first half. So you got the sense that Halliburton was going to at least make his mark on this game eventually. And quite frankly, it wasn't just him, but it was a matter of time. They did very much need something like this. And it wasn't just him getting the output that he did by the end of the game. I'll get into that when I do. But the kinds of shots that he took, floaters over big men and Hartenstein and Holmgren earlier in the ball game. A tough-ass layup as the game is going on. I think this is in like the third quarter during his 10-point flurry there. He just gets a tough-ass bucket in the paint on SGA, none other than. And then also just nabs a steal, gets an easy transition dunk. He was just all over it in this game. And down the stretch, he did a good job overall of making sure that his team was in the right position to come out with a victory. But again, for the most part, they did have some gaps down the stretch, and again, I'll also get into that there. The second quarter is where things did start to get a little crazier. I mean, I watched most of the second quarter, and let's just say that the Pacers are so very fortunate to have guys like TJ McConnell and Benedict Mathurin coming off the bench. Off the bench. And in just the first few minutes of McConnell's playing time during this game, he got like 3 points rather, 4 assists and 3 steals or something like that. Just a madman. You know, everybody says to watch out for Alex Caruso. But TJ McConnell, when he is on, can do the same thing when it comes to getting in the passing lane and disrupting plays. Obviously, he is not exactly Alex Caruso defensively. So I'm not even going to fix my lips to say something like that. That would be fucking crazy. But that impact was swift, immediate, and it allowed the Pacers to have a short lead. Also, Benedict Mathurin is quite literally turning himself into one of the best 6 men in the NBA, as if that wasn't already the case. But his entire playoff run, especially in these last 2 series, last 3, has been very remarkable for a player in his position. In the second quarter, to get 7 points in just 3 minutes of play is insane. And that continued over the course of the game. He couldn't miss. He was so damn efficient. He got to the foul line at will, and he was just a relentless scoring option for them. That's certainly not something that the Thunder were anticipating, and that fucked them up for a little bit, I'm not going to lie. Now, even with them being down by 4 points, 64-60, at halftime as a result of all this, they were able to respond accordingly. They did start out with like a 6-0 run in the third quarter and did eventually find their footing again. But it wasn't necessarily Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which could have given cause for pause. I mean, granted, he did have a 9-point third quarter, but what helped them more here was the fact that the Pacers continued to have breakdowns on the 3-point line. Because you're trying so hard to guard SGA, and They were doing a relatively good job of that. I mean, by the end of the third, right, 21 points. Yeah, but 4 turnovers as well. They were trying to hound him, and I get that. A man coming into the game averaging like 35, either 35.5 or 36.5 points per game in the NBA Finals so far. You have to do everything you can to stop him and slow him down. I get that. But why do they keep on leaving Alex Caruso open from the corner? Also, Lucian Storch was able to make him pay. For a while, he made all 4 of his three-point attempts. Again, similar thing. You know that he's a lethal shooter. Why are you giving him the space to make something happen? I just didn't understand that. But even then, it's not about how you start games. It's not about how you start halves. It's about how you finish them. And for a while, it looked like the Thunder could be the team to do it. I mean, they were even, though they don't necessarily shoot many three-point attempts, they did have the advantage in three-point makes and three-point efficiency by a large margin. But the Pacers were able to steal some possessions that led to extra shots for them. And more often than not, they ended up converting on a good percentage of them, which did come back to bite the Thunder in the ass. Also, the big man play for the Thunder, it left a little bit to be desired. I'm not going to lie to you. I would have expected more from Holmgren because, keep in mind, in the first half he had like 15 points or so. Dropped off completely in the second half. He didn't do much of a goddamn thing. And it would have been helpful given what the hell was going on with other players on the Thunder. Struggling to create their own shots efficiently and having to just settle for foul after foul after foul. Even that wasn't necessarily reliable. In the fourth quarter alone, they missed, like, I want to say 5, including 3 very, very crucial ones, I believe. I think they missed like 6 on the game as well. A team that's usually adept at doing so, especially with their main star being able to do so, came down to earth a little bit. Even he missed the free throw. And at that point, it was like, damn, okay. But I think the more egregious party, even with Chet Holmgren shooting just 33% from the field, at least he had a double-double with 20 points and 10 assists. I'm looking at Isaiah Hartenstein and I'm like, dude, what? Because offensively, it seemed like he was a little bit erratic out there. You know, he just overshot some of his routine floaters that he would usually make. Like, he clearly wasn't in rhythm for a good duration of this game right here. And it's not even necessarily about that, but if that's going to be the case, you know, you'd like to see more intensity from him on defense, ramped up intensity on the boards, and to an extent, he had that. But when it came down the stretch, you have Chet Holmgren just getting killed by Miles Turner and others, and you don't help him? Like, where exactly are you at? What exactly are you engaged in to where you can't divert your attention to one of the more important offensive players on the team? Even when it came to guarding a guy like Pascal Siakam, who also had a pretty good turnaround game in this one, after struggling in game 2 as well. Just had nothing to show for it at all. And I found that very strange. What I also found strange is a specific play in the third quarter, I believe. You have SGA just taking on Andrew Nembhard. And eventually, he gets the screen to where Thomas Bryant is matched up on him. At that point, I instantly knew that brother was going to get cooked. And what does Shai Gilgeous-Alexander proceed to do? He breaks that nigga down. Breaks him down and gets him jumping in the weirdest of ways for a foul. And gets himself 2 free points. So a word of advice to Pacers staffers: you should never have that happen again. Because Thomas Bryant, even with his frame, is not a good defender in the first place. To match him up against one of the best, not just offensive players, but isolation players in the league is fucking insane. And you really thought he had a chance against that? Okay. Sure. You would have also liked to see a little more from Jalen Williams, at least in an effective sense. I mean, he did also settle for free throws late because hitting shots was a little harder for them at that point. But nonetheless, he was efficient. He led them in scoring with 26 points and shot like 9 of 17 from the field or so. But he also was turnover prone as well. So it was a very mixed bag of results here for that squad. He kept them in it for as long as he could. But at the end of the day, the mistakes he made earlier in the game were just too much to overcome. Also, Ben Shepherd is still an interesting case. It's like, I don't know. He can bring the defense, but, you favor, as the Pacers have shown time and time again, you favor the more physical defense that Nembhard and Nesmith possess, especially in a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, then you trust Ben Shepherd. Because as I've seen over time, and as people have stated on these broadcasts, he doesn't necessarily try to, go chest up with anybody on that side. He's a defender that tries as best as he can to just stay home. He will occasionally fall for some things, but he never tries to force the issue. And on a few occasions, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was able to exploit that, at least when he was in the game matched up against him. Because you got to keep in mind that Nembhard was in foul trouble. Siakam was also in foul trouble for a little while, even though that's not the direct matchup. But that's also something really important to point out. I don't think Nesmith was in foul trouble, but even then, guarding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a huge ask for anybody. If you can try to get a rotating pool of players to guard him, you'll do it. It's what the Thunder have done against Tyrese Haliburton. And again, to just show how great he was doing as well, at a point of time, he scored on 6 different defenders. So the Thunder are deploying the same tactic here and trying to get other players to guard Tyrese Haliburton instead of the usual, 2 people they would look to. And it's very interesting because People wanted to shovel 20-point games. Let's just put it like this. Halliburton has won an astronomically high percentage of games over the course of the entire season in which he's had at least 20 points. Meanwhile, we're talking about a player in SGA who damn near tied the single season record for most consecutive 20-point games. And even still, when it came to those were occurrences that were few and far between. Most of them were just filled with 30-point outings, some 40-point outings, and a career high 50-plus point outing. Again, Halliburton is not necessarily a score-first player, whereas SGA is. And yet the narrative, because of that, when it comes to reaching 20 points, is a little just skewed at times. I may as well just say it, so let's just think about this, right? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander did play most of the fourth quarter. I thought they were going to conserve him up until clutch time. But I feel that it makes sense because the Thunder were losing their traction at that point a little bit. So they felt that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander could help them get out of it, and he usually has. You certainly entrust him at that point with this responsibility. There's no questioning that. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, for quite literally one of the first times this particular season at least, allowed the pressure to get in his head. Because as the game reached clutch time and got further into it in this fourth quarter, you could sense how badly Shai was feeling the pressure. You didn't only have Andrew Nembhard guarding him, but wherever he went, the attention of at least 3 guys focused up on him. And it distracted him. It got him completely shaken up. So where, for a while there, he was looking for his first field goal in the fourth quarter. He eventually got it on a pretty tough look as the Thunder were trying to inch back in it. But he still didn't do enough at that point to make things competitive for them. And thus, the Thunder ended up losing 116 to 107 to them. It's like you look at a guy like Halliburton, again, who doesn't necessarily score, but he did have his highest output of the series when it came to him getting 22 points on 9 of 17 shooting, with 9 rebounds and also 11 assists. 4 turnovers is a little high for him as well, but that's alright. What mattered is that the Pacers were able to temporarily protect home court and buy themselves some leverage. I've already stated that I might expect the Thunder to come away with this next one if I do think it's going to go to 7. But they're in a very good spot right now. And to think that there are still multiple things that they can improve upon. Multiple things. Because by no means was this a perfect game for them. And by no means was this the perfect ending to a game when it comes to trying to close out a team. But I'll get to that in a little bit. Let's look at SGA for a second. Because a player who typically averages 30 ended up having just 24 points on 9 of 20 shooting with 6 turnovers, more than the assists he had in the game, in just 3 points total in the fourth quarter. That is insane. You are never expecting SGA to produce that little amount. By no means is 24 points a bad game, though. And again, that's the craziness. For SGA, it could be perceived as such. But for Tyrese Halliburton, he is going off if he has a 20-point double-double or so. And again, to an extent, that's true. Because again, damn near over 90% of the time, I believe, is the stat, he has won in those situations. So it's not necessarily like a bad thing to say that, but there are flaws with looking at the virtually exact same output that way. That's all I'd say about that. Obi Toppin is ridiculous. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but for this man to just fly through the air the way that he does, it's pretty ironic enough because he is in fact from, or coming out of Dayton University, the Flyers over there. Shout out to them. And he had a very, very great career there. It's still just crazy to think that the Knicks took him in the lottery prior to Tyrese Halliburton coming off the board. Now they're both on the same team. All these years later, as Obi Toppin literally just gets the craziest fucking putback dunk possible in the middle of a game that allowed them to take a series lead and give them 2 more games at least to close this thing out and get the Pacers their first ever NBA championship. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, because again, they very easily, if not for some missed free throws, could have gotten themselves in some trouble down the stretch. Had like 2 straight possessions with just dumb turnovers, one by Tyrese Halliburton, and then another just completely random pass leading to another turnover. Those possessions, I think both of them, led to some form of scoring. Luckily for them, it subsided, and they were able to come away with a couple late Siakam buckets, as he would get himself to 21 points. Benedict Mathurin as well throughout this fourth quarter, by that point, is just taking names. Like literally, he, as the broadcast stated, he gained so much confidence, and nothing deterred him. Even some great contests from oncoming defenders didn't faze him at all. He just made it work and made them continue to pay throughout the stretch, as he would also get 27 points of his own, a playoff career high in the NBA Finals, coming off the bench as a 6-man. It's fucking crazy. Both teams had everyone, or at least 3 players on both sides, get to 20. But at the end of the day, that doesn't always matter if you can't handle the physicality. And it's safe to say that on certain cases down the stretch of this fourth quarter, it felt like the Thunder were a little worn out. I mean, on this same putback that I'm mentioning from Obi Toppin, you have Lou Dort on the outside guarding him, and it's like he could, with his frame, box him out. Yet he doesn't jump and allows Obi Toppin to just get a free couple of points. Very atypical stuff compared to what we have seen for the most part from the squad. But nonetheless, a very, very good response from the Pacers. Game 4 is tonight. I'm amped for that shit. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. Anyways, in terms of other developments, I believe that there are a few, but the most glaring one to me is the fucking circus going on in New York right now. Because at this point, with every single move that they are trying to make, it feels like you should have just kept Tom Thibodeau at that point. Like, how is it that you fire him, okay, and then you ask for interviews for, apparently, allegedly, 5 different coaches? The Doc Rivers interview request is still a debatable one. I'm not necessarily sure if that's true or not. But what we do know is this. They tried interviewing Chris Finch, Jason Kidd, Ime Udoka, and Quinn Snyder. And for every single one of them, the opposing team rejected it every single time. Do you know how bad you have to be to make that happen? Where every other team is turning those interviews down. And it makes sense. Like, keep in mind that Thibodeau, at this point, is just a couple games removed from the NBA Finals, even if he has his litany of drawbacks. We get it. But at the same time, Ime Udoka is a head coach that's probably set in Houston for a while. Chris Finch is probably set in Minnesota for a while. Jason Kidd, if he can withstand the move to trade Luka Doncic away for at least a few more years, he's probably set in Dallas. And Quinn Snyder is the most compelling one because obviously the Hawks suck. But even then, he's still in a good place. He has solid job security over there. So he's not going anywhere. What the hell made them think that other coaches who mostly are in fine positions would move on from their post to go to a team in New York that is just going to consistently breed pressure, breed unnecessary and unwanted attention, and is quite honestly a little bit of a mess right now because of the media circus. Like, obviously, they're trying to get other things straightened out with their team, and then you have people coming in and talking about, oh, Giannis could be a Knick. There's a lot for them to figure out right now. And I don't think these head coaches necessarily want a part of that right now. Not to mention that you're trying to request all these interviews. It's like, hello, Mike Malone and Mike Brown are both good coaching options that are still free agents at this point. And you could definitely put your hands on those two. Yet you will elect not to pick those guys up, at least one of those guys up, for the job. That doesn't make any sense. But that will do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.